The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber stretched high above the gathered representatives, its transparent walls revealing the swirling nebula beyond. 47 different species filled the curved seating tiers, each delegation, positioned according to their military ranking in the galaxy. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime, converting thousands of different sounds into meaning. Ambassador Velmoth of the Draknari Empire slithered up to the central speaking platform, his 8-foot frame covered in midnight black, scales that reflected the chamber's lights like obsidian mirrors. His serpentine head swayed as he surveyed the assembly, forked tongue tasting the anticipation in the air. The Draknari had dominated galactic warfare for 3 centuries, their natural armor and venomous fangs making them nearly unstoppable in close combat. Honored delegates, Velmoth's voice carried the distinctive hiss of his species, amplified by the chamber's acoustics. Today we address a matter of both safety and common sense. The annual intersystem combat tournament approaches, and we must discuss the participation of certain newer species. A ripple of knowing chatter swept through the assembly. In E, the far corner, tucked away in the smallest delegation section, sat the human representatives. Ambassador Jihoon Park, a man in his 60s with silver-streaked hair and deep lines around his eyes, remained perfectly still. His weathered hands were folded in his lap, and his expression gave nothing away. Beside him, Captain Minseo Kim sat in her crisp blue uniform, her military posture rigid despite the obvious hostility in the room. The Cromnid delegation rumbled their approval from their reinforced seating area. These massive beings resembled walking boulders, their thick mineral hide capable of deflecting plasma weapons. Their representative, a 10-foot giant named Crushstone, nodded his boulder-like head slowly. The Draknari speak wisdom, his voice sounded like grinding stone. Some species are not meant for true combat. From the upper tiers, the Veltar delegation chittered in their rapid-fire language. These lizard-like beings moved so fast that they appeared as blurs to most other species. Their reflexes measured in microseconds rather than milliseconds. Their representative, a sleek female named Swift Strike, spoke in translated standard. "We have observed these humans in preliminary assessments. Their reaction times are embarrassingly slow." The crystalline ethereals pulsed with soft light as they communicated telepathically among themselves. These beings of pure energy housed in crystal shells rarely spoke aloud, but their representative's voice resonated directly in everyone's minds. Their mental capabilities are equally limited, no psychic potential whatsoever, quite primitive. Velmoth raised his clawed hand for silence. "The motion before us is straightforward. We propose to officially ban humans from participating in the intersystem combat tournament. This is not cruelty, it is mercy." The chamber erupted in various forms of alien laughter. The insectoid hive collective produced a sound like clicking machinery, their compound eyes glittering with amusement. The gas-dwelling nebulans wheezed through their breathing apparatus, creating a sound like escaping steam. Even the normally stoic Gorvani, beings of living stone, produced deep rumbling, sounds that shook the floor. "Consider the facts," Velmoth continued, clearly enjoying himself. "Humans possess no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no venom, no energy projection. Their skin tears at the slightest contact. Their bones break under minimal pressure. They require constant atmospheric support and die within minutes in space." The laughter grew louder. Someone from the Plasma Lords delegation called out, "They cannot even see in proper spectrum ranges." This brought fresh waves of amusement from species who could perceive everything from radio waves to gamma radiation. Furthermore, Velmoth pressed on. "Their emotional responses are chaotic and unpredictable. They form attachments to other species, show mercy to enemies, and often sacrifice strategic advantage for meaningless concepts like honor and compassion. In serious combat, these weaknesses would prove fatal." Ambassador Park finally stirred, slightly, his fingers drumming once against his knee. Captain Kim's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but neither human spoke. The quantum shapers, beings of pure energy who existed partially outside normal space-time, flickered in agreement. We have run probability calculations. Their representative's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. In any combat scenario against established galactic powers, human survival probability approaches 0 within the first engagement. Then, "We are agreed," Velmoth declared. "All in favor of excluding humans from the tournament for their own protection." The vote began immediately. Massive claws, tentacles, energy appendages, and various other appendages rose throughout the chamber. The Draknari voted yes. The Cromnids voted yes. The Veltar voted yes with lightning-quick movements. The Ethereals pulsed their agreement. One by one, every delegation raised their vote in favor. When the counting was complete, the result was exactly as expected. 46 species in favor, with only humanity abstaining from voting on their own exclusion. As delegates began filing out of the chamber, their conversations filled with continued jokes about soft-skinned mammals and atmospheric-dependent weaklings, Ambassador Park slowly rose to his feet. His movement was deliberate, controlled, and somehow managed to catch Velmoth's attention despite the chaos of departure. "Ambassador Velmoth." Park's voice was quiet, but it carried clearly across the space between them. The Draknari paused, his serpentine head tilting with curiosity. "You judge our species by what you can see on the surface," Park continued, his tone conversational, almost friendly. "Soft skin, fragile bones, limited senses, but you mistake restraint for weakness, and that is a dangerous error." Velmoth's scales rippled with what passed for laughter among his kind. "Restraint? Or simple incapability?" Park smiled then, and something in that expression made Captain Kim glance at him sharply. It was not a pleasant smile. "Perhaps one day you will learn the difference." The human ambassador walked away without another word, leaving Velmoth's laughter echoing through the increasingly empty chamber. The orbital station Nexus Prime stretched across space like a massive metal flower, its 5 arms reaching out into the void while its central hub pulsed with activity. Ships from across the galaxy had gathered here, creating a traffic pattern that looked like organized chaos. Sleek Draknari warships with their serpentine hulls slithered through space alongside. The angular geometric vessels of the Ethereals. Massive Cromnid battlecruisers, built like flying fortresses, docked at reinforced ports designed to handle their tremendous weight. Inside the station's central arena, beings from 46 different worlds packed the viewing galleries. The air thrummed with excitement as translation devices worked overtime, converting cheers and battle cries into a symphony of alien anticipation. Massive holographic displays showed the tournament brackets, each matchup analyzed and debated by experts from every corner of known space. In the main broadcast booth, announcer Krixtal adjusted his position on the specialized perch designed for his insectoid frame. His 4 arms moved independently as he operated different control panels, while his compound eyes tracked multiple screens simultaneously. Each of his 1,000 individual lenses could focus on different aspects of the arena, giving him a perspective no other species could match. "Galaxy-wide audience, welcome to the 307th Annual Inter-System Combat Tournament." Krixtal's mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke. The sound translated into excitement across dozens of languages. "I'm joined today by the renowned combat analyst Whisper of Starlight, broadcasting directly from the Ethereal Collective." The crystalline being floating beside him pulsed with soft blue light, her voice resonating directly into the minds of viewers across space. "Thank you, Krixtal. Today we witness the finest warriors our galaxy has produced, each representing the apex of their species' combat evolution." On the arena floor below, the Veltar warm-up session had begun. These reptilian fighters moved so fast they appeared as green and gold blurs to most observers. Their specialized high-speed cameras barely captured their movements as they practiced against holographic opponents. One fighter named Razorwind demonstrated his signature technique, striking 17 different targets in what appeared to be a single motion. The crowd gasped as the replay showed each individual strike happening in microseconds. "Observe the Veltar combat stance." Whisper of Starlight's mental voice carried notes of admiration. "Their nervous systems process information at speeds that would overload most organic brains. When they fight, time itself seems to slow around them." Krixtal's compound eyes swiveled to focus on another section of the arena. And there, we see, the Cromnid delegation preparing for their demonstration. These magnificent beings represent the ultimate in natural armor development. The Cromnid fighters looked like walking mountains. Their leader, a massive warrior called Iron Crusher, stood 12 feet tall and weighed nearly 3 tons. His carapace resembled polished granite, with veins of metallic ore running through it. When the demonstration began, Iron Crusher simply stood motionless in the center of the arena while automated weapon systems opened fire. Plasma bolts that could melt through starship hulls splashed harmlessly against his natural armor. Particle beams designed to cut through asteroids barely left scorch marks on his rocky hide. The crowd roared approval as Iron Crusher finally moved, each step shaking the arena floor, and casually swatted aside a combat drone with one massive fist. Incredible, chittered Krixtal. The Cromnids have evolved beyond the need for weapons or protective gear. They are living fortresses, but the most impressive display came from the ethereal contestants. These beings of pure energy housed in crystalline shells didn't need to move to demonstrate their power. 3 ethereal warriors floated motionless in the center of the arena, while a series of increasingly difficult challenges materialized around them. Heavy metal barriers twisted into knots without anyone touching them. Combat robots collapsed as their electronic brains were overwhelmed by psychic pressure. One ethereal named Mindrender casually lifted a 50-ton piece of arena equipment with pure thought, spun it through complex patterns in the air, then gently set it down in a completely different location. The ethereals represent the evolution of consciousness itself, Whisper of Starlight explained to the awestruck audience. Physical limitations mean nothing when the mind can reshape reality. Throughout the demonstrations, a constant theme emerged. In the commentary and crowd reactions, every species present represented some form of evolutionary perfection. The Plasma Lords could generate temperatures hot enough to melt steel with their bare hands. The Shadow Hunters could become completely invisible and phase through solid matter. The Quantum Shapers existed partially outside normal space-time, making them nearly impossible to target. During a brief intermission, Krixtal's mandibles clicked with amusement as he addressed a question that had been circulating through social networks across the galaxy. Many viewers have asked about the recent council decision regarding human participation. Let me paint a picture for our audience. The main display showed archived footage of human military exercises. To the galactic audience, it looked almost comical. Humans running obstacle courses at speeds any Veltar child could exceed. Humans using primitive projectile weapons that would bounce harmlessly off Cromnid armor. Humans requiring bulky environmental suits just to survive in space. Imagine these beings facing Razorwind in combat. Krixtal's voice carried barely contained laughter. The fight would end before their primitive nervous systems could even register the first attack, or picture them attempting to damage Iron Crusher with their small chemical explosive weapons. They would exhaust their entire arsenal without leaving a scratch. The crowd throughout the station erupted in various forms of alien laughter. In the Draknari section, serpentine beings hissed their amusement. The insectoid hive collective created a sound like clicking machinery. Even the usually serious Gorvani rumbled with something resembling mirth. The Galactic Council's wisdom in protecting humans from this tournament cannot be questioned, Whisper of Starlight added, her crystalline form pulsing with what passed for humor among her kind. It would not be combat, it would be accidental genocide. But while 46 species celebrated their warriors and mocked the absent humans, none of them paid attention to the outer docking rings of Nexus Prime. There, among the merchant vessels and cargo haulers, sat a plain grey ship that looked like it had seen better decades. The name Persistence was barely visible on its hull, painted over scratches and micrometeor impacts from years of hauling freight through dangerous space. Inside that unremarkable vessel, 12 humans went about their routine maintenance work. Captain Ji-Won Lee checked navigation systems while humming an old Earth song. Engineer Hyunwoo Cho calibrated the mining equipment they would need at their next stop. Pilot Yuna Kang practiced flight maneuvers on the simulator, not because she needed to, but because she enjoyed the challenge. None of them were watching the tournament. None of them cared about the mockery echoing through the station's corridors. They had work to do, places to be, and people depending on them to deliver their cargo on time. They were just ordinary humans doing ordinary jobs, completely unaware that the galaxy's definition of extraordinary was about to change forever. The first sign of trouble was the way space itself seemed to ripple around Nexus Prime. The viewing screens in the tournament arena flickered for just a moment, showing strange distortions in the starfield beyond. Then reality tore open like fabric, and 60 ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect attack formation. These weren't the sleek vessels of civilized species or the geometric craft of advanced races. The pirate fleet looked like a collection of nightmares welded together from scrap metal and salvaged weapons. Their ships bore no unified design. Some looked like predatory insects with weapon pods for claws. Others resembled floating junkyards bristling with missile launchers. The largest vessel, clearly their flagship, was a massive amalgamation of at least 5 different ship types, fused into something that shouldn't have been able to fly, yet somehow did. The attack began before Nexus Prime's sensors could even register the threat. Streams of plasma fire, particle beams, and exotic energy weapons converged on the station's outer shields. The protective barriers that had withstood asteroid impacts and solar flares lit up like aurora displays, then began to buckle under the sustained assault. In the arena, Krixtal's compound eyes went wide as emergency lights bathed the commentary booth in red warning strobes. "This is not part of the tournament," he chittered frantically into his microphone. "We are under attack. Repeat, Nexus Prime is under attack." Whisper of Starlight's crystalline form pulsed with alarm colors as she reached out with her psychic abilities. "I sense chaos." Her mental voice carried notes of fear that spread to viewers across the galaxy. "Thousands of hostile minds, organized but savage. This is not a military assault. This is a raid." Throughout the station, blast doors slammed shut as emergency protocols activated. The tournament arena's massive viewing windows shuttered closed just as the outer hull began taking direct hits. Spectators from 46 species screamed, roared, chittered, and expressed panic in dozens of different ways as they fled toward evacuation points. But the galaxy's greatest warriors didn't flee. They had trained their entire lives for moments like this. The Veltar response was instantaneous. Teams of reptilian fighters moved through the station's corridors like green lightning, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to navigate chaos that would have paralyzed other species. Razorwind led a strike team toward the primary docking bays, where pirate boarding craft were cutting through the hull. His clawed hands moved so fast they seemed to leave trails in the air as he prepared for close combat. The Cromnids took defensive positions at key choke points throughout the station. Iron Crusher planted himself at the main intersection leading to the civilian evacuation centers, his 3-ton bulk blocking the entire corridor. When the first wave of pirates rounded the corner, a mix of cybernetically enhanced beings wielding energy weapons, they opened fire without hesitation. Plasma bolts that could melt through starship armor splashed harmlessly off his rocky hide. The Ethereals coordinated the defense from the command center, their psychic abilities allowing them to communicate instantly across the entire station. Mindrender reached out with her consciousness, attempting to disable the pirate vessels directly. Her mental powers touched the enemy flagship and immediately recoiled. "Something is wrong," she transmitted to her allies. "Their minds are shielded, protected by technology I don't recognize." The first boarding parties broke through the hull on multiple levels simultaneously. The pirates were unlike anything the galaxy had seen in organized warfare. Some were clearly once members of civilized species, but they had been modified with crude cybernetic implants and combat drugs that turned them into barely controlled berserkers. Others were from the unexplored regions beyond known space, beings that looked like they had evolved specifically for violence. But what made them truly dangerous was how they fought. When Razorwind and his Veltar team cornered a group of pirates in a maintenance corridor, the enemy immediately grabbed a group of fleeing civilians and used them as shields. The Veltar warrior, trained in honorable combat, hesitated for just a microsecond, long enough for a pirate with cybernetic arms to fire a weapon that shouldn't have existed. The projectile moved faster than even Veltar reflexes could track. Razor Wind's natural armor, evolved over millions of years to deflect energy weapons, offered no protection against the primitive but devastating kinetic round. He collapsed, green blood pooling around his motionless form. The pirates laughed and moved on, leaving their hostages behind without a second thought. At the choke point Iron Crusher was defending, the enemy tried a different approach. Unable to penetrate his natural armor, they instead detonated shaped charges against the corridor ceiling above him. Tons of reinforced metal crashed down, not to crush the Cromnid warrior. His body could easily support the weight, but to trap him in place. While he struggled to clear the debris, pirates flowed around him through maintenance shafts he was too large to block. The ethereals faced perhaps the worst shock of all. When Mindrender attempted to crush the mental defenses of a pirate leader, she discovered that the being had no higher consciousness left to attack. Crude neural implants had burned out most of his brain, leaving only aggressive instincts and basic motor functions. Her psychic powers, evolved to dominate complex minds, were useless against enemies who had voluntarily lobotomized themselves. Throughout the station, similar scenes played out as the galaxy's elite warriors discovered that their opponents didn't follow any recognizable rules of engagement. Medical bays were targeted specifically. Wounded defenders were executed rather than captured. Pirates used banned weapons that caused lingering, agonizing deaths rather than clean kills. In the command center, station officials watched their tactical displays with growing horror. Red warning indicators spread across the station schematic, like a virus. Evacuation transport Hope's Light is taking fire. The communications officer's voice cracked with panic. They're targeting the civilian ships directly. Ambassador Velmoth, who had been observing the tournament as an honored guest, stared at the displays in disbelief. This is impossible, he hissed. Our warriors are the finest in the galaxy. How are these savages overcoming them? The answer came from Whisper of Starlight, her crystalline form now pulsing with urgent warning colors. They fight without honor, without restraint, without any consideration for innocent life. Our champions were trained for combat between civilized beings. These enemies recognize no such limitations. On the tactical display, civilian evacuation ships scattered like frightened fish as pirate vessels closed in. Some of the refugee transports were armed, but their weapons were designed for defense against single attackers, not coordinated assault fleets. One by one, the evacuation ships' shields failed under concentrated fire. That's when a new voice cut through the chaos on the emergency frequency. Calm, steady, and completely unexpected. Command, this is cargo vessel Persistence requesting permission to assist with civilian evacuation. In the command center, every alien head turned toward the communications station. The duty officer, a nervous Draknari with flickering tongue, responded quickly. Negative, Persistence. All civilian vessels are ordered to maintain safe distance. This is a military operation. There was a brief pause. Then the same calm voice replied, Understood. Persistence out. But on the tactical display, the small grey dot representing the human cargo ship didn't retreat toward the safe zone with the other civilian vessels. Instead, it began moving directly toward the center of the battle, where pirate ships were closing in on the helpless evacuation transports. Ambassador Velmoth's scaled features twisted in confusion. What are those primitive fools doing? They'll be destroyed in seconds. None of the aliens in the command center could have predicted what happened next. Captain Jiwon Lee stood at the bridge of the Persistence, watching the pirate fleet tear apart civilian evacuation ships on his main screen. His weathered hands gripped the control console as memories flooded back, not of hauling cargo through peaceful space lanes, but of his 20 years in the Human Defense Corps before he'd retired. To become a freight captain. Yuna, get up here, he called to his pilot. Seoyun, take the co-pilot seat, everyone else emergency stations. The bridge filled quickly with his crew of 11. These weren't soldiers anymore, they were miners, engineers, and traders who had chosen peaceful lives after their military service ended. But as they looked at the tactical display showing pirates slaughtering civilians, something hard and determined settled in their eyes. Yuna Kang slid into the pilot's chair, her fingers dancing across controls she hadn't used for combat in 8 years. Captain, Their flagship is 3 times our size and armed with military-grade weapons. We're a cargo hauler." "Hyun-woo," Ji-won called to his chief engineer, ignoring the obvious mismatch. "How much mining explosive do we have in the hold?" "Hyun-woo." Joe pulled up the cargo manifest on his tablet. 40 tons of high-grade asteroid crackers, enough to split a small moon if we placed them right. "Can you rig them as torpedoes?" The engineer's eyes lit up with the same dangerous gleam Ji-won remembered from their old unit. "Give me 10 minutes, and I'll give you the biggest bullets in the galaxy." "Sun-ho," Ji-won turned to his weapons specialist, officially the cargo systems operator. But every human ship needed someone who understood defensive weapons. "What do we have to work with?" Sun-ho Park studied his console. "Standard cargo hauler armament, 2 light pulse cannons for asteroid clearing, point defense lasers for micrometeors, and the industrial tractor beam for cargo handling." "And the mining charges Hyun-woo's rigging? Those will work once, maybe twice if we're lucky. After that..." Sun-ho shrugged. Ji-won nodded grimly. The Persistence hadn't been built for war. She was a simple rectangular hull designed to carry maximum cargo, with minimum fuss. Her engines were built for endurance rather than speed. Her hull plating was meant to resist cosmic radiation rather than weapons fire. But she had something the pirates wouldn't expect: a crew that understood how to turn peaceful tools into weapons of war. "All power to engines and whatever weapons we have," Ji-won ordered. "Yuna, plot an intercept course for that pirate cruiser attacking the evacuation ship Hope's Light." As the Persistence accelerated toward the battle, every alien eye in the Nexus Prime Command Center watched in amazement. The small grey ship moved with purpose and precision, weaving between debris and weapons fire with maneuvers that seemed impossible for a cargo vessel. "Look at their engine output," whispered the Dreknari communications officer. "They're redlining everything. Their power core should overload." But the humans had done something no other species would consider. They had removed every safety protocol, every limiting factor, every system designed to prevent catastrophic failure. If their engines exploded, they would die. If their power core overloaded, they would die. But right now, dying wasn't their biggest concern. The first pirate ship to engage the Persistence was a heavily armed raider that should have ended the fight in seconds. Its plasma cannons fired full spreads that lit up space around the human vessel. But Seo-yeon had taken over piloting duties, and her hands moved across the controls with the fluid grace of someone who had once flown combat missions in the asteroid. Fields of the Outer Rim. She didn't try to dodge the weapons fire, that would have been impossible. Instead, she flew directly into it, using the cargo ship's industrial-grade hull plating to absorb hits that would have vaporized civilian vessels. The Persistence shook and groaned, her hull glowing red-hot in places, but she kept flying. "Hyun-woo, now!" Ji-won shouted. The mining charges, launched from improvised torpedo tubes, actually modified cargo bay doors that Hyun-woo had rewired in minutes. The explosives weren't guided missiles. They were simple kinetic projectiles moving at tremendous speed. The pirate ship's captain had seconds to decide: turn away and expose his vulnerable engine compartments, or maintain course and risk collision. He chose wrong. The mining charges detonated against the raider's hull in a chain reaction that cracked the ship like an egg. Atmosphere vented into space in glittering streams, and the vessel went dark. "First kill confirmed," Sun-ho reported, but there was no celebration on the human bridge. 30 more pirate ships remained, and the Persistence was already showing damage from that single engagement. The second pirate vessel tried a different approach. Rather than engaging at range, it moved to ram the cargo ship directly. The pirate captain clearly believed that a head-on collision would destroy both vessels, but that his crew would survive long enough in their emergency suits to be picked up by allies. He had never fought humans before. Seo-yeon waited until the last possible second, then triggered the industrial tractor beam at full power. The invisible energy field, designed to move asteroid-sized chunks of ore, grabbed the pirate vessel and yanked it off course. But instead of letting it fly past, she held onto it and used the ship's own momentum to slam it into a second pirate vessel approaching from behind. The explosion lit up space for thousands of kilometers. When the glare faded, both pirate ships were gone, and the Persistence flew through the expanding debris field with new scorch marks decorating her hull. "Impossible," Ambassador Velmoth whispered from the command center. "That ship should be destroyed. How are they still fighting?" But the humans weren't done. As more pirate vessels closed in, the crew of the Persistence began using tactics that defied every rule of civilized warfare. When their hull was breached by weapons fire, they sealed the gaps with emergency foam and kept fighting. When pirates boarded through the damaged sections, the crew met them with mining tools, welding torches, and improvised weapons that turned maintenance corridors into battlefields. Engineer Minho crawled through ventilation shafts with jury-rigged explosives, appearing behind boarding parties to detonate charges that cleared entire sections of the ship. Pilot Dongyun used cargo handling equipment as weapons, crushing pirates with massive mechanical arms designed to move containers. Throughout the battle, Captain Ji-won held the bridge while blood seeped through his uniform from a dozen different wounds. A piece of shrapnel had torn through his shoulder. Another had grazed his skull. But he continued giving orders in the same calm voice he'd used to direct cargo operations. The turning point came when the pirate flagship, a massive vessel bristling with stolen military weapons, moved to finish the evacuation ships directly. The Hope's Light and 3 other civilian transports were helpless, their engines damaged and shields failing. "Seoyon," Ji-won said quietly, looking at the tactical display. "Can you get us alongside that flagship?" "Captain," she replied, understanding immediately what he was asking. "We won't survive ramming something that size." "I know." Ji-won looked around the bridge at his crew, these people who had followed him from military service to civilian life, and now back to war. But those transports have 18,000 civilians aboard, families, children. The bridge fell silent, except for the sounds of distant explosions and failing systems. Then, one by one, his crew nodded. "Evacuation transports, this is Persistence," Ji-won spoke into his communicator. "Continue your escape vector. We'll buy you time." The cargo ship turned toward the pirate flagship, her engines burning at levels that would have made any engineer weep. As she accelerated into her final attack run, the Persistence looked exactly like what she was, a battered, dying cargo hauler held together by determination and emergency repairs. But she flew straight and true, and when the explosion came, it lit up 3 star systems. The last thing transmitted from the Persistence was Captain Ji-won's voice, still calm despite everything. "Evacuation complete. Persistence signing off." Then there was only light and silence, and 18,000 lives that continued, because 12 humans had remembered what it meant to fight not for honor or glory, but simply because someone had to. 3 days after the battle at Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council chamber filled once again with representatives from 47 species, but this time there was no laughter, no chittering conversation, no melodic trills of amusement. The massive crystal dome that normally buzzed with the sounds of galactic diplomacy was as silent as deep space. Ambassador Velmoth moved slowly to the central podium, his serpentine form lacking its usual predatory grace. His midnight scales, which had gleamed with confidence during the previous session, now seemed dull under the chamber's lights. Behind him, the main holographic display remained dark, waiting. "Honored delegates," Velmoth's voice carried none of its former arrogance. "We are gathered to review the incident at Nexus Prime. The security footage has been compiled and verified by independent sources from multiple species. What you are about to see is unedited combat recording." The display flickered to life, showing the orbital station as it had appeared during the tournament, proud, gleaming, filled with the galaxy's finest warriors. Then came the pirate attack, the chaos, the desperate attempts at evacuation. The assembled delegates watched their own species' champions fighting with skill and courage against an enemy that recognized no rules of civilized warfare. But then, the footage shifted to something that made every being in the chamber lean forward. In their seats, a small unremarkable cargo vessel, moving against the tide of fleeing civilian ships, heading directly toward the heart of the battle. "The vessel Persistence," Velmoth announced, his forked tongue tasting the air nervously. "Registry indicates the human cargo hauler, crew of 12, carrying mining equipment to the Outer Rim territories. The first combat sequence showed the cargo ship's impossible maneuvers. The camera angles switched between external views and internal bridge recordings, creating a complete picture of what happened inside that battered hull. Captain Ji-won Lee stood at his command station, blood streaming from a head wound that would have sent most species into shock, calmly giving orders while explosions rocked his ship. "Hyunwoo, status on those charges?" His voice came through the audio feed with perfect clarity. 30 seconds, Captain," came the reply from somewhere in the ship's burning interior. The external camera showed the Persistence flying through weapons fire that should have vaporized her. Her hull glowed white-hot in places where plasma bolts had struck, but she kept flying. When the mining charges launched from her improvised torpedo tubes, the explosion that followed lit up the entire tactical display. In the council chamber, Iron Crusher of the Cromnid delegation shifted his massive stone body uncomfortably. His people were known throughout the galaxy for their ability to absorb incredible amounts of damage, but watching the human ship take hit after hit while continuing to fight defied everything he understood about structural engineering. The footage continued, showing the second engagement where the Persistence used her industrial tractor beam as a weapon. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the human pilot grabbed an attacking vessel and used it as a projectile against another enemy ship. The tactic was crude, brutal, and devastatingly effective. "Note the tactical innovation," Velmoth said quietly. They converted civilian equipment into military hardware in real-time combat conditions, but it was the boarding action footage that truly silenced the chamber. Internal security cameras showed pirate boarding parties cutting through the Persistence's hull, expecting to find terrified civilians. Instead, they met Engineer Hyunwoo crawling through burning corridors with improvised explosives, appearing behind enemy lines to detonate charges that cleared entire sections of intruders. The camera followed Hyunwoo as he dragged himself through. Ventilation shafts too narrow for most species. His breathing labored from smoke inhalation. When pirates cornered him in a maintenance bay, he didn't surrender or beg for mercy. Instead, he smiled grimly and triggered the charges he'd been carrying, taking 6 enemies with him in an explosion that shook the entire ship. Swift Strike of the Veltar delegation watched with her lightning-fast eyes, processing details that other species missed. She saw how the humans moved, not with her people's supernatural speed, but with a deadly efficiency that wasted no motion. Every action served a purpose. Every movement brought them closer to their goal of protecting the civilian evacuation ships. The most devastating footage came from the bridge recordings. Captain Ji-won, wounded in a dozen places that should have incapacitated him, manually piloting his dying ship through weapons fire while giving calm instructions to his crew. His hands moved steadily across damaged controls, making minute adjustments to keep the Persistence flying despite hull breaches, system failures, and the constant impact of enemy weapons. "Seoyeon, can you give me 5 more degrees to port?" His voice remained steady, even as sparks erupted from consoles around him. "Working." "On it, Captain," came the reply from the pilot station, where another human fought to keep damaged engines responsive. But what shocked the galactic delegates most wasn't the humans' tactical skill or their ability to absorb damage. It was their faces during the final assault. The cameras captured every expression as the crew of the Persistence realized they were flying into certain death to save the evacuation transports. There was no fear, no hysteria, no breakdown of military discipline. They looked like miners and traders and cargo handlers, because that's exactly what they were. Ordinary civilians who had found themselves in an extraordinary situation and refused to let innocent people die on their watch. The final sequence showed the Persistence's last moments. Her hull cracked and burning, atmosphere venting into space. She flew straight toward the pirate flagship that was moving to destroy the helpless civilian transports. The external cameras captured her final approach, a cargo ship held together by emergency repairs and sheer determination, flying into the teeth of military-grade weapons fire. Inside the ship, Captain Ji-won spoke his last words into the communicator. "Evacuation transports, you are clear to jump to hyperspace. Persistence signing off." The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems. When the light faded, Both the cargo ship and the massive pirate flagship were gone, leaving nothing but expanding debris and 18,000 saved lives. The footage ended, and the Galactic Council chamber remained silent for long minutes. Representatives who had mocked human weakness just days before now stared at the blank screen, trying to process what they had witnessed. Ambassador Velmoth's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. These beings fought not for honor, not for glory, not for territorial gain or species dominance. They fought because someone had to. They died to save strangers who had shown them nothing but contempt. Around the chamber, the galaxy's most powerful beings, warriors who had conquered star systems, commanders who had led armies across entire sectors, sat in humbled silence. They had seen their own champions, bred and trained for combat, fall to enemies who fought without honor. Yet 12 humans with mining equipment and cargo handling tools had succeeded where all their elite forces had failed. The motion before. Cas, Velmoth continued, his serpentine form seeming smaller somehow, is to rescind all restrictions on human participation in Galactic Council activities. Furthermore, I propose we extend full membership and military alliance status to their species. The vote when it came was unanimous. Not a single representative spoke against it. Not a single voice was raised in opposition. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, conversations were muted and respectful. No one made jokes about primitive biology or fragile mammals. The galaxy had learned something that day about the difference between warriors who fought for glory and humans who fought simply because someone had to. The tournament was never held again. It seemed somehow inappropriate after what they had witnessed, and in the cargo lanes of the galaxy, human ships began to notice something different. Other vessels would yield right of way without being asked. Station controllers would prioritize human docking requests. Alien crews would nod respectfully when they passed humans in spaceport corridors. The galaxy had finally understood what humans meant when they said they were just ordinary people doing what needed to be done. The end.